We can wash 200 to 300 cars per hour, and we can do it with 3 or 4 people.
What helped you to identify that as something, man, you wanted to be really focused on?
It was the first time in my life I ever heard of Tommy's Car Wash. I looked at all their numbers, their business plan, and I was like, wow, this looks quite interesting. When somebody had a successful business, there's an underlying, and some businesses are just a lot more operational intensive than others. The car wash market in general had a pullback of between 5 and 9%.
This is your Real Estate Syndication Show. I'm your host, Whitney Sewell. I'm excited about today's interview with our guest, Dave Zook. He's been a friend for a number of years. I've enjoyed spending time with him in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, where he is from as well. He is an investor that is open to diving into different asset classes, which he is going to elaborate on today. And I hope that if you haven't been exposed to these asset classes, that this will pique your interest, and that this would be the beginning of your education in some different asset classes, even outside of multifamily, because it may benefit your portfolio. He's become a tax expert, and sometimes it's beneficial, right, to know about these different asset classes that have different implications on our tax portfolio, the tax situation. So he's a founder of the Real Asset Investor. He started in 2015 after growing a handful of successful businesses, which resulted in significant tax savings for himself. And so he's expert in ATMs and car washes and self-storage and even some natural gas investing, which he's going to elaborate on today. Dave, welcome back to the show. It's been a little bit honored to connect with you again and learn more about, how your business is growing, what you all are focused on right now. Why don't you give us an update just to start?
Whitney, thanks for having me back on your show. And it's time you get out here to Lancaster again. I remember the last time you were here, we had a great time, but a lot has happened since we last saw each other. And we're living in interesting times, which can be challenging, can be good, but it's different. It's a different world out there than the last time you were here. Since you've been here, I mean, we built a lot of car washes. We're building car washes. We've got 10 in operation now, and we've got 19 more under construction. So it's a busy time. We're going to have a bunch of car washes. We got grand openings happening every couple of weeks for the foreseeable future. And we love the space. There's a lot to like about the car wash space. And the longer I'm in it, the more I learn about it, and the more I learn about the space, the more exciting it becomes. And there's a lot of opportunity there. So not all is, we talked about, I talked about markets changing and times changing, whatever. Not all of that is, it's not all negative. Some things are harder to get done than it used to be. A lot of things are harder to get done than they used to be, but there's still a lot of good things going on out in the marketplace, and we're working hard and getting things done.
That's awesome. I want to dive more into the just your insights on the market and what you mean by that in just a moment. But for those that are new to this asset class, as far as car washes, what initially attracted you to car washes, and maybe even the particular brand? I know you're in the Tommy's Express specifically, but what helped you to identify that as something, man, you wanted to be really focused on?
Yeah, so it's sort of a long story, but I'll try and keep it short. It was I started out as a sort of consultant in the deal. One of my investors called me and asked me to look over his shoulder. His son-in-law and a friend were putting a deal together, and a business deal together, and they asked me to come on and take a look at the business model and see, if I could poke some holes into it. And so it was the first time in my life I ever heard of Tommy's Car Wash, Tommy's Express Car Wash. I'm like, oh, okay, that's interesting. I looked at the numbers. I looked at all their numbers, their business plan, and I'm like, wow, this looks quite interesting. But I had a lot going on, and I sort of shelved it for a while. And then I had another investor in Kansas who had just built a car wash. And of course, I didn't know anything about car washes. And so I was on a call with him one day. He called me about something else. I said, did you ever hear of Tommy's Express Car Wash? He said, well, yeah, I just built one. I just built a Tommy's Express Car Wash. And then he spent the next 20 minutes telling me how Tommy's was the best thing ever. And I shelved it again. And then a dear friend of mine, he called me and he was like, hey, just wondering if you would take a look over my son-in-law's shoulder. And so this is like the second go around for the son-in-law and his friend, and different group, total different group. And he was like, just wanted to see if you would want to take a look at this, look at their business model. I said, sure, I'll do it for you. What is it? Tommy's Express. And I had never heard, prior to, 2 months earlier, I'd never heard of Tommy's Express Car Wash before in my life. And so I turned around and called my friend who originally brought me his son-in-law, their deal, the very first one. And I said, hey, join me on this call. You may want to just jump on here and listen in, just, see if their stories align and see if it makes sense. And so we did, and we spent, probably 30 to 45 minutes on the call. And we got off the call and called each other, and we were like, oh my goodness, did you hear that? We kind of like these guys. And so after a few more calls, we ended up, they had private equity money all lined up and ready to go for them. And after a few more calls, we talked them off the ledge and said, hey, we'll be your capital partners. How about that? And so that's how we got into the game. Look, we studied the business model several times. We learned about the product. And, after a while, it just started making a lot of sense.
Yeah, I know that you have a lot of background in multifamily. A lot of the listeners do as well. Obviously, I do. But speak to just some things maybe an investor should be thinking about early on when initially thinking about a car wash like this. And I know I'll ask you some questions maybe about some due diligence and operational stuff. But maybe initially some of the things that investors should think between, that's been in multifamily for a while and they think, oh, maybe this car wash thing is something I should investigate or look further into. What are some guidance there, at least high level?
Yeah. So, number one, the business model has to make sense. When you're looking into a new asset class, you got to see a path to prosperity, a path to, success. And so, one of the things that really caught my attention was the margins. On a stabilized car wash, it's a cash flow machine. And so, I looked at that. I looked at the subscription model. That's kind of a big deal, and especially when you're thinking that you're going to, head toward an exit in, 5 to 6 years. You want to see, okay, who are my buyers? And based on the research that we did in the marketplace, we're like, private equity firms and institutional capital is starting to really get interested in this space. And we saw a couple of the transactions go down, and you're talking, aggressive multiples on EBITDAs, and being paid for these car washes. And one of the problems turned into an opportunity for us. One of the big problem in the space is of the 60,000 car washes in the United States. There's a very, very high percentage of those car washes that are owned by mom and pops who own 3 or less. And so when you think about you're an institution wanting to come into the space, wanting to take a 9-10 figure position, in order to do so, because the space is so fragmented, you'd have to buy, 10, 20, 30 different operators with a bunch of different equipment, a bunch of different software, hardware systems, just a mishmash of a whole bunch of different stuff. And that becomes very challenging. So we looked at it and said, okay, how can we build this so we can deliver a package to the marketplace? If we have a buyer in 5 years, great. But this is a business model that can make a lot of sense to hold on to and cash flow in the long term. Our plan is to build and sell. We will do that if we can get a premium, and the real premium that we're seeing in the marketplace today. If that is still available when we build out this portfolio, it's most likely we'll sell.
Wow. Well, speak to maybe some of the metrics or indicators that you're looking for in this specific asset class, maybe through the due diligence process, or just what's different about that process, maybe that the listeners wouldn't be familiar with?
Yeah. So one of the things in a new asset class, this was new for me. This is, we didn't have car wash in our portfolio before. But one of the exercises I like to go through is, I like to look back and say, okay, 2008 to 2010, what happened? How did this asset class perform? 2020 to 2023, how did this asset class perform? And really just go through that exercise. I went through that exercise in the self-storage space and really liked what I saw. That's sort of what got me into the space. I wanted to provide some stability and some sort of a hedge in my portfolio. And so looking, okay, how viable is this business? And how dependent is it on a red hot economy? Can it withstand a pullback or a recession, or when the economy softens? And so I liked what I saw there. I liked the stability. Normally, what we like to see in a healthy tunnel car wash is about 60%, 55 to 65% of our revenue comes from our monthly subscriber base. So they pay whatever, $19 a month to $35 a month, depending on the quality of the wash that they choose. You can get the basic wash, or you can get the wash and the wax, and you can get your tires done. You can get you can get the whole package. So $19 to $35, and then knowing that that's consistent monthly revenue, whether their car is being washed or not. One of the things that we like about the subscription model, it doesn't matter if it's pouring down rain. There's very few people going to come wash their cars, but we're still making money. We've got a healthy subscription base. So knowing that about the space. The other thing is, you're coming through COVID and realizing, how hard every business owner over the last 4 years will tell you one of the biggest challenges in our business was hiring good people, keeping good people around. Think about a restaurant that's got, 20, 30, 40 people in-house working. Well, we can wash 200 to 300 cars per hour. Wow. And we can do it with 3 or 4 people. And so that's the other thing too, that, institutions, take a look at and say, okay, here's some of the challenges we faced in, look at Chick-fil-A, look inside a Chick-fil-A on a busy Saturday or a busy time, and you'll see, 20, 30, 35, 40 people. When you consider everybody in the whole restaurant, when you consider the staff and kitchen, back office, whatever, we can do an incredible amount of business, 200 to 300 cars an hour with 3 to 4 people on site.
I love the subscription model, right? Just the continuous cash flow, like you're talking about. Even if they don't get a wash that month, there's still income, like you're talking about. But also I feel like, as we've obviously been involved in property management heavily, over the last number of years now, it's like I feel like we had been a staffing service more than anything, right? At times, just high turnover in some of those some properties or whatnot, and to think about, okay, find 3 employees and you can still function, right? You said 200 to 300 vehicles per hour, and can get that done with that just low number of manpower, really, right? Or employees. That's, the hassle factor is way down.
Right. And the other thing too is, you're taking, the systems and the processes are so strong inside the Tommy's organization. You can take, an 18-year-old kid, and you can, that was flipping burgers, and you can pay them $3 to $4 an hour more to come and work at a Tommy's, and they're loving their life. They love their job. We're paying them a good wage, and we can do that because there's only, there's not 30 of them. There's only 3 or 4 of them. At most any day of the week. And so just being able to provide a nice, clean work environment, being able to pay above average wage, that allows us to attract good people and keep good people.
Speak to the. I know you've mentioned in the past, or I've heard other interviews, and you and I've talked about just the importance on the operator's track record, right? And speak to, uh, how you knew this operator was top notch, right? Or that they knew how to operate, or was it based on even exits, right? Sounds like your all's plan eventually is to exit a number of them, right? Probably all at one time. But was that a factor that maybe there wasn't as many exits, or is it mostly focused on the just day to day operations and cash flow, or how did you look at that and their track record?
Yeah, so they were very well connected, very smart guys, very well connected in the M&A space as well. So when we looked at, okay, how can we build this out? How can we get an operations team that we feel very comfortable with? We found them, and of course, we started small. We started with, in the first year, we had, I don't think it was 7 car washes that we bought that were operational, and let them sort of, get in there and do their thing. One of the things we quickly found was when somebody when somebody had a successful business. Let's say you had an exit. Let's say you had somebody who was, whatever, 40 years old and had an exit, and had a really good exit, and they wanted to do something else with their life, and they started tinkering around with car wash, and they bought a ranch, and this is a live scenario right now that I'm telling you about, but we've seen this a number of times where guy buys a ranch, and he also said, well, I'm not done, I'm not done in the work, I'm not done working yet, whatever, I'll just do a car wash. How about we just build a car wash? And it becomes a little bit passive for him. He can run that business passively, and it can make a lot of sense for him. I mean, they're not super hard to manage and operate, but still, at the end of the day, an asset class is an asset class. Whether you're talking about multifamily or self storage or car washes, there's an underlying business. I mean, you really what you have is an operational business, and some businesses are just a lot more operational intensive than others. We got into this space. We quickly saw that when we acquire a car wash from one of those semi-passive owners, and the car wash was done great, we can take that car wash and quickly just sort of ramp that thing up, because our guys, our operations team, they live, breathe, eat, sleep this stuff. And when you come in with that kind of mindset versus somebody that's semi-passive, you're going to get results quick. And so, yeah, just we're super excited about our operations team, and they've been doing a really good job. They've been super busy, as you can imagine, having a bunch of sites under construction right now, and just being able to, get them to the finish line, get them operational, and then being able to. We were just going over the numbers the other day, and in terms of monthly subscribers coming out of the gate on opening weekend, of the last 5 washes that we've opened, we've got the number 1, the number 3, the number 5, the number something else, and number 15. We have 5 of those are in the top 15 ever in terms of performance coming out of opening day weekend or opening weekend. That's from Thursday to Sunday. And so, yeah, just excited to see how the team's performing. Look, at the end of the day, though, this is a development fund. We're building car washes. It takes a while to get them built, takes a while to get them operational, takes a while to get them to stabilization. But, once you have that, and once they're operational and get stabilized, you got an asset that not only will perform very well for you and create real wealth for you, but you also have an asset class that if it's managed well, you got the right equipment, you got a package, you can put a large package together and become an institutional target quickly.
What's the speak to the tax benefits, depreciation around car washes?
Yeah, so car washes are one of the only two asset classes. Car washes and gas stations are the only 2 asset classes that I know of where the building is part of the equipment is considered the tax write-off. You can take the tax write-off for the building at the same speed as you can the equipment. So let's say most of your equipment is a 5-year depreciation schedule. Well, your building is a 5-year depreciation schedule. And when you walk through a Tommy's and you kind of get that tour, and by the way, I'd love to give you one sometime. When you go take the tour, you quickly realize that the building is sort of part of the equipment. I mean, you got the equipment, all inside of it, and so your building, you don't have to go do a cost sake study. Your building is, you've got you're on a 5-year depreciation schedule. And, of course, right now we have 60% bonus depreciation. So you can take 60% off in the first year. So yeah, very aggressive on the depreciation side. And, it can be a real tax shelter as well.
I want to give you a moment too. I wanted to speak to the just market trends around car washes. You mentioned earlier about, does this asset class depend on it being a red hot market, and looking into 08, 09, and even the most recent, few recent years. What did you learn during, those studies, and about car washes specifically, or how they performed? And what did you, I assume it was good, or you did pursue it. So, but, how did you assess that?
So what we found is, the car wash market in general had a pullback of between 5 and 9%. And when you look at a stabilized car wash's, margins, you quickly recognize that you can easily withstand a 5 to 9% correction. The other thing too is, a lot of people, they're like, well, okay, it's time to get tough. That's something that you'll easily be able to just, wash your car at home, or you don't have to wash your car, whatever. But and I always say, like, really, for bottom entry wash, at $19 a month, you're really going to drive around in a dirty car. And many of these even lower income folks who live in a mobile home park, you'll drive through a mobile home park and you quickly recognize that their most prized possession, or the most valuable, I don't know if you can call it an asset, but their most valuable possession is their car. And, many times even more expensive than the home that they live in. What do you think? They're going to drive around in a dirty car when they spent their, most of their life savings on it? I doubt it. And then, of course, the transition. I mean, you've seen all the multifamily apartment buildings that got built in the last, 5-10 years. I mean, it's not even practical in many cases for people to wash their cars off at home. So, even lower income folks will oftentimes keep their subscription. They may drop some other stuff, but they'll hang on to their subscription. It gets really sticky. Those subscriptions, once you're hooked, and that's the other thing. This tunnel car wash is designed and created in a way that it makes the ladies feel safe. I mean, the bright interiors, not dark tunnels, plenty of room. You go on a track. You don't have to go in the narrow little steel track. It's going on a mat, and you just, there's a lot of things that we've done to create an environment where the ladies love this car wash. And when you can create a habit, I can tell you for certain that if you were to get my wife to go through to put that in her routine, she goes grocery shopping at 8:45 on a Monday morning. That's when she goes grocery shopping. While she's grocery shopping, you have a Tommy's Express car wash there, and she gets her groceries, and then she comes out of the grocery store. She goes through the tunnel car wash, gets her car wash, now she's on her way. If you were to get her to do that 2 or 3 times, now she's got a habit. We're creating habits, just like you would create habits by whatever, selling cigarettes or alcohol or Starbucks or whatever else. You create that habit, and I certainly wouldn't recommend any of them except the car wash. Any of those that I mentioned, except the car wash, of course. But you're creating habits. And once you can create that habit, those subscriptions get really sticky.
Yeah, speak to other risks that maybe investor wouldn't know about around car washes, or and how you all mitigated some of them.
There's construction, and whenever you have construction, there's, I mean, you name them. There's all kinds of risks. I mean, we try to mitigate those risks the best we can. We try to, we don't typically take down any real estate without knowing for sure. Our diligence period is pretty long, and we're going through the steps to make sure that we can actually build a Tommy's Express car wash at that site. There's risk, there's time delay, there's cost There's inflation risk. I mean, you name them, they're there. You know, just gotta fight through them. One of the things that helps with this scenario is it's not a 2 to 3 year build process. This is a 7 to 8 month build process. So you get the package, you get the whole package, the steel, the package, the equipment, everything comes from Cummings. So you can sort of control your costs there, and you don't have that long drawn out building period where you get caught. You get caught in, sure, you got to deal with inflation, but it's not like you get caught in a you know a 2.5 year lifespan, and costs go up, costs come down. You get caught in the middle of that.
Yeah, that I didn't realize that. But you're buying a whole kit really and putting it together, so you know what the entire cost is going to be from the beginning. Yeah, I like that. What about you mentioned selling these? Like the goal is to sell them in the future, but just wondered about growth strategy. You all project doing a certain number of these. How you have so many per fund, or how are you structuring some of that and just looking for future growth?
We've got 60 to 75 car washes in the pipeline, and so it's going to be a busy next 2 to 3 years. But it's one of the things we've learned when institutions come in. They not only want to buy your stabilized car washes, they will buy your pipeline, because it's really hard. And this. Whenever you get into construction and permitting and titling, any of that stuff, it's hard. And so they don't have their investors aren't patient. They would rather get into something, add a little value, and then roll it up and flip it to the next buyer, the bigger buyer than them, oftentimes. But so they will pay they'll pay a premium on not only your stabilized and your semi-stabilized and product that's just gone through the grand opening phase or is halfway built. They'll buy a premium. They'll buy the whole package. They'll pay a premium for even partially started construction, or even pre-construction, just simply because of the amount of work and time, mostly time. You're talking in the markets that are really, really desirable to be in. And I'll give you a couple. Like, take for instance Manassas, Virginia, right outside of DC. You can imagine how tough that is. Fairfax, Virginia, again, right outside of DC. We own that market. And, you think about that. And one of the advantages for us has been that, well, okay, we can do what we need to do on those lots while we're, doing what we're doing over here with the next 5, 6, 8, 10, and we can just chip away at that. We're patient. It's not costing us a lot of money to hold the land, but we can push that through at our own pace, or rather their pace, which is incredibly slow and hard. But those are the kind of things that gives you an advantage, because private equity isn't going to come in and do that. They're not patient enough. They want to buy something that's stabilized, or at least semi-stabilized.
Yeah. So 10 operating, 19 under construction. What do you see in this fund, or how many did you say?
Yeah. So we got 19, and I think there's 19 in construction, under construction, 19 active construction sites going on right now. And what we're doing is there's 5 or 6 car washes per each fund, and each fund has a diversification piece to it, where you'll have maybe 2 or 3 different states represented in your fund. So you have diversification across a couple different states, and you'll be in, let's say, 5 or 6 different car washes. When that fund fills up, then we start, fund 3 and fund 4 and fund 5 after that.
Wow. Okay. Well, I want to. Now we've talked about car washes, because I'm brand new to this asset class as well, other than talking to you about it. So I love that, and just to expose investors listening to that as well. But I want to be able to spend just a couple minutes too, allowing you to elaborate on the natural gas sector, right, and what you're doing there, and so investors are exposed to that, because I feel like there's probably opportunity in both for different ones listening, and speak, and for the sake of time, we'll have to I won't be able to dive in a whole lot. However, and maybe we have you back and talk a little bit more about natural gas. But Dave, what about what attracted you to natural gas? Kind of like car washes. What attracted you to this asset class? And let's dive into that a little bit.
So I am somewhat of a contrarian investor. And I'll give you an example of that. I got into the uranium space when I really got in heavy into the uranium space when it was selling at $17 a pound, when I knew the cost to produce it was around $65 a pound. So when I see an asset class that's needed, and I see that it's been a terrible bear market for a long time. Natural gas has been a long bear market for a good while. It's been underinvested in. I see other things brewing, like, say, for instance, we started to ship overseas, and we're really expanding on that. In fact, in the next 2 to 3 years, our capacity to export natural gas will double based on what's in the pipeline right now to be built and is being built. So when you see that, and then you understand that the international market is oftentimes the spot price is 5, 8, 10 times more than it is here. It doesn't cost that much to ship natural gas. So when you see those things sort of develop, I like that, and I like to get in front of that. And when you can get in front of some of those things, it really you're riding with the current instead of trying to fight the current. And so I first started investing my own cash in the natural gas space about 6 years ago with this family in Pennsylvania, and we've done well despite. Look, this is a volatile space. I've been investing in natural gas when the spot price was, less than $1. Of course, I've been involved in the space when it was $9, and so you get a lot of volatility. But when you understand that it's a 30 to 50-year play, that kind of changes your perspective. It's like, okay, it doesn't have to be high priced in the first year, 3 years, 5 years for me. Just as long as as long as the fundamentals remain and it happens at some point. So I like the space. I think there's a lot of upside in the price, and we stand to benefit when we get that higher gas price. And so I started looking for a really good operator. I found this family. It's a fourth generation family that own their own real estate, which is kind of a big deal. When you're not drilling on state or federal land, the administration that's intact, doesn't, normally they start with federal lands and start, putting the squeeze on operators of federal land. So our operator is one of the lowest cost operators in the space, which was very attractive to me. But the other thing to me is it's also part of my tax planning. It's an asset class that is very attractive from a tax perspective, and the tax impact that it can have. It will give you, we're projecting between 70 and 80% depreciation, or the tax impact, the first year, and that'll wipe out the tax liability on any income, not just passive income, not capital gain, any income. So it's really, it's helped. It's one of the asset classes that's helped me stay tax efficient.
Wow. And on any income, it doesn't just have to be passive income.
Right.
Yeah. Wow. That's a big deal. That's a big deal. What about you mentioned 30 to 50-year play. Elaborate on that a little bit. I guess your expectations of the overall investment and being that long, of a game plan.
Yeah. So typically you'll get about a third of your production in the first 5 years. You get about half of your production in the first 10 years. And then you get the last half of your production in the next, 20 to 40 years. So, you want to be right, the earlier the better. But at the same time, where you can really, do well in this space is when you invest when prices are low, because that's when you can negotiate the best contracts. That's when you control your costs and make sure you get it into the well for a reduced amount of dollars. And then, of course, hopefully ride that wave when that spot price ticks up.
Wow. So, speak to, especially to investors that have never even thought about investing in this asset class. What do they need to know? What do they need to be thinking through? Obviously, long-term investment, but like, what are some expectations there that they should have when thinking through this asset class? And maybe that the depreciation on any income is probably going to perk a lot of ears, right? But what are some things they need to know about if they really want to add this to their portfolio?
First, you got to be accredited to get into our fund, or in fact, pretty much any oil and gas fund that I know of. It's for accredited investors only. And then look, just realize, just make sure that you have the mental toughness to ride through the cycles, because this is a volatile space. And I've felt the impact of a $7, $8, $9 gas. I've felt the impact of the negative impact of a $1 to $1.35 gas. That will test your investor psychology right there. You go through a couple of those times, but for me anymore, I've been doing this a long time. So for me, it's I don't get emotional about this. I'm like, hey, it's as long as I'm right, it'll come sometime. It don't have to come in the first year, 2 years. I just got to be right at some point.
How do you see technology changing the car wash or natural gas space, or maybe ways that you all are using tech or AI or any of those things?
Yeah, everything's becoming more sophisticated. When you're thinking about the natural gas space, you can now stick a drill into the ground, and your technology is so good that you can go down a mile and then out lateral, whatever, a mile and a half, and you can hit a cavity like 6 foot in diameter. And so when your geologists are good and they can find the gas, and then you can put that drill bit drive that drill bit into the gas. That's all technology. You think about that 20 years ago and what we would have thought about that, or even 10 years ago. The technology has advanced in a real way in the last 10, 15 years. And even in the last 5 years, it's always getting better.
What about just predictions you have, Dave, on the market economy over the next 12 to 18 months, and how that's affecting what you're investing in or buying or selling?
Yeah, so I believe, look, different asset classes are going to bring us different opportunities in the next, I would say, especially in the next 2 years. We probably would have thought that they would have had to back off. If you'd asked me, 2 years ago, if they can take, if interest rates can go up to 7.5%, 8% without breaking something, I was like, oh man, I don't know. But it's been pretty resilient. I think part of that is because there's so much cash on the sideline for so long, and it's just been pretty resilient. Now there are asset classes that are taking that harder than others, and I think we're in for some real interesting times, some real hard times for some, opportunities for others, and maybe a mix of both. But it's I feel like if we approach the marketplace, we as entrepreneurs and business owners approach the marketplace in terms of how can I bring value. There's going to be plenty of times in the next 2 to 3 years for us to bring value to the market, and so that sounds like opportunity to me.
Or what about your best advice for passive investors right now?
Find great operators. Look, we can talk about. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what the asset class is. Some asset classes are a lot more operational intensive than others. But at the end of the day, you're dealing with real people. You're dealing with problems. You're dealing with stuff. And so I think finding a great operator is the key that will make the difference between a passive investor being having an enjoyable experience or having a nightmare experience.
What are the most important metrics that you track? Could be personally or professionally.
Number one, I don't feel like I can deliver for my team and for my family, for my investors. I don't feel like I can deliver as great an impact when I'm not healthy. So I pay attention to the food I eat, the amount of water that I drink, the exercise that I do. I got my 100 burpees in for the day. I got a run in this morning. I mean, so I take that seriously. In terms of those kind of metrics, I think if you're going to go out in the marketplace and, like I mentioned earlier, solve problems and deliver value, you're going to be healthy. So pay attention to your health, pay attention what you consume, and then the same way, paying attention to what you consume, up here, what information you take in, what books you're reading, who you're listening to, and just. So for me, it's about personal growth, physical health, getting around the right people. When you're talking operations team, just making sure that your operations teams are good and solid, and they're doing a good job.
What's a way you've grown recently, personally? You're talking about personal growth.
Yeah, so I continue to read a lot. We do several different book studies. In fact, sometimes they overlap and it gets hard to keep up. But we have some book studies within our company, within our leadership teams, and then we also have a book study group that's made up of 10 business owners in the area here, and we get together once a month and we dine together and we discuss the last month's book that we read, and what we learned from it, how we can put those things to practice that we learned in the book. But yeah, just consuming great content, get around good people. That's for me. I think that's the key to growth.
Is there a recent book that you'd recommend that stood out to you?
We've read a lot of books. One of the if I'll give you this one. If you're a fund manager and you're working in the business that you and I are working in, this is a good one. Have you ever read What It Takes by Stephen Schwarzman?
No.
That's a good one. For your listeners, a really good book in terms of daily habits and making small changes to your lifestyle. Darren Hardy's Compound Effect. That one had an impact, had a really good impact.
One of my favorites.
I read that one. I've read that one a number of times. I read that soon after it came out, and I made some small changes. I just looked at some things that I was doing. I was like, wait a minute. If I keep doing that for 10 years, I will have consumed, my daily habits. I will, one of my daily habits was, drinking a coffee and dumping in a sweet and low and dumping in some artificial creamer. And when you look at the ingredients and you're like, what am I really doing here? And then you think, okay, wait a minute, if I do that for 10 years, I will have consumed whatever, a pickup truck load of that garbage. Is that going to serve me, or is that going to destroy me? And one of the things I just told my kids just recently, I was like, one of the things that I will make a decision based on how I feel. 10 minutes, one day, 1 year, what that looks like. And if the answer is yes, I'll feel good about that in 10 minutes. Whether that's a cold plunge or something that's just totally undesirable. And I will commit to making a decision based on if it's going to be good for me, and if the effect is going to be positive. Doesn't matter if it feels good right now. That's just messing with your psychology and just making that decision. It comes it takes a discipline, but if you stick to the process and create good habits and pay attention to especially to your the things that you do on a daily basis, whether that's what you eat, whether that's what you read, the news that you watch, or whatever, and you just replace that with something great, 10 years from now, you're going to be a different person.
Yeah, I love the book, The Compound Effect. I read it for the first time probably 3 or 4 months ago, and immediately I thought, man, this has got to be an annual read. Right. And you can listen to it, I think, in 4 or 5 hours or something. But Man, no doubt about it. Appreciate the recommendation there, and the other book that I've not heard of, the fund management book, What It Takes. I'm definitely going to look that up, Dave. Dave, I appreciate your time and just bringing your expertise around two asset classes that I know are not talked about very often. Definitely haven't been on the show. You're one of the few that have talked about car washes, and the only one I think that's talked about natural gas. So grateful for the expertise and your time. Always appreciate you. And how can the listeners get in touch with you and learn more about you?
So you can go to our website at therealassetinvestor.com, or you can email our team at info@therealassetinvestor.com. And if you send us an email, we will respond.